All right, we're recording. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Wherever you are, whoever you are, this music is obnoxious. Let's turn that down a little bit. My name is Grant Henry. This is the first inaugural version of whatever we're going to call this thing. Right now, it's just, hey, come out and meet the team. Meet the Bibically Conservative team. What we're doing right now is just giving you sort of a glimpse into the personalities that are creating this movement in Middle Tennessee that we hope will take over the entirety of the nation. The people behind it, their stories, their motivation, where they're coming from, what they hope to see accomplished in this area through Bibically Conservative. Now, you know what we do here in this program. You know what we do on Kingdom and State. This is something distinctly different. This is a little bit looser of a format. It's a little bit more conversational. This is something that we hope we're going to live stream at some point once I can actually work out the technology behind that. But in my general assessment here, Bibically Conservative, we're trying to just take a biblical approach to all things in life. All things of wherever you're starting from. All things in culture, all things in politics, just all things in general. Now, let's go directly to our incredible panelist here. I want to start with Andrew. Give him a quick introduction as to who you are. We'll go to Jess after that, and then we'll get really deep into some of these questions. But Andrew, buddy, thanks for joining us. Who are you? Tell everyone about yourself.
Thanks for having me, Grant. So I just recently moved to Tennessee from California after a very fun time enjoying the pandemic by the beach out there. During that time, I just kind of got fed up with what was going on. People close to me, people that I cared about were kind of, spreading these false lies and the different things that were being said on the news that were trying to get us to live in a state of fear, which is the exact opposite of what we're supposed to do. So I finally decided to take a stand, use the platform that I had at the time, and be outspoken. And I came across a lot of different people that wanted to challenge my position. And it just, the more people that I encountered, the more it fired me up to actually take a stand for the biblical truths, the foundation that we are meant to stand on. And so, I moved to Tennessee, stepped out in faith, made the decision. About a month and a half later, I was here. And just to go back a little bit further, I grew up in the church. And so these were things that were kind of built into me as a young kid. And, once this pandemic hit and I saw what was going on, I finally just made the decision. I was like, I don't care if I lose my job. I don't care what happens. People need to hear the truth. And so I started sharing that. And as much as I could, I would, kind of lean towards the fact that God wins no matter what happens, no matter what the outcome. And we should not be living in fear. We should not be hiding and shying away from the public sphere. We should be boldly standing in our faith. And now Andrew, I'm here in Tennessee.
Sorry, go ahead, buddy. Sorry.
Now I'm here in Tennessee. Met you, Grant, at a Moms for Liberty event, and got introduced to the rest of the people at Bibically Conservative. And I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, standing in the back of the room in Moms for Liberty. I was like, that guy's on. Let's figure out why he's here. But I want to focus on one thing you said before we get to introducing Jess, because I think there's a bit of overlap in the stories here. You said that you moved to Tennessee out of faith. Is that correct? I mean, there was no job set up here. It's just literally just Middle Tennessee for some reason, yeah?
Yep.
That's extremely
interesting. I made a trip out here in December, and by the time I got on the plane to go home, I'd already made the decision, and the only thing at that point was figure out how I'm going to tell the people that I work for that I'm leaving, tell them when I'm leaving and how much longer they have me. I have no clue what I'm going towards, but I know I'm called in that direction, so I'm going to go.
Jess, on the other line here, go ahead and introduce yourself to our team. And also, unless I'm wrong, Jess, here, I think you also had somewhat of a similar story of just like happenstance coming to Middle Tennessee. You're definitely not from here. Is that correct?
Yep, I'm not from here, and I have a very similar story. So to everyone who doesn't know me, my name is Jessica McElroy. I grew up in a Christian household and had very strong conservative views and values in my family. But my stance and in my faith in politics has grown substantially over the last couple of years. I believe it's that when we're at our lowest, that God reveals himself to us the most. And let's just say I've hit rock bottom a couple times in my life where I had nowhere to look but up. And that's when my relationship with God matured and blossomed, and because he quite literally saved me. And so I desired to have a personal relationship with him. So over the past few years, with my relationship with God growing, this last year during the pandemic, it was around May, June, I had lost my job because of COVID. So I was living in a town, didn't have a job, and didn't necessarily know what I was going to do or where I was going to go. My lease on my apartment was going to be up soon. So I just really didn't know where I was going to go. So I just started praying that God would lead me where I'm supposed to be, where I'm supposed to go. And I had several people mention Nashville, but I didn't really know why. There was nothing here for me. I'd never been here. I didn't know anybody here. So that seemed a little odd to me. But as I had been praying, I had a friend that I met about 10 years ago reach out to me on Instagram with a job offer. And she said she needs someone in Nashville, Tennessee. So I took that as confirmation, like the last confirmation I needed to know that I needed to be in Nashville. I still didn't really necessarily know why, but I knew that God put a job in my lap and a location. So about 3 weeks later, I was packed up and moving to Nashville. And so God very much brought me here and then led me into everything that I'm doing now with Bibiclally Conservative, the people that I've met along the way. So I just feel very much like I was placed here for a purpose.
Yeah, see, and this is what I'm saying, y'all. So you've heard me on either Kingdom and State or whether it's a talk radio stuff, or if you know me personally, you've heard me tell these stories about how I think something is happening in Middle Tennessee. There's this dynamic convergence of all things spiritual, political. Something is happening here that is undeniable. That's why I wanted these two to tell their story first off about how they came here, because it helps to tell that narrative, not just at sort of like this macro 30,000 foot level. It helps to tell that narrative also at a personalized narrative of I know these people personally. They come into Bibiclally Conservative. So if I could go back to Andrew real quick, and Andrew and Jess, I know you're both fairly prolific on social media. If you want to start by plugging some of your personal social media things, then tell me what brought you into Bibiclally Conservative, either because like you thought Christians had a role to play in politics, or maybe the church did, or just in particular this actual project we're talking about. Andrew, what brought you here?
It's a loaded question, Grant.
Yeah, right. It is. That's what I'm good at, buddy, is loading up these questions.
What brought me to Bibiclally Conservative was, like I said before, during the pandemic, I decided to put my foot down and say enough is enough and start speaking the truth. And, I'd have people lash out at me and attack me verbally with the different, names they could call me. And I kept my cool, was reserved. I sent them information and research that they could look at. And the coolest thing was, because I did not engage in the emotional attacks of them trying to get something inside of me that is going to see beyond logic and reason, I was able to actually turn these people by the end of the conversation. And bit by bit, as I started to do this more and more, I realized it wasn't out of being right. It was out of trying to share the truth with them and get them to understand my perspective, but also get to know me to a certain degree by understanding what it is that I'm actually believing in that has led me to the conclusions that I have come to. Now, when it comes to my Instagram plug that you just asked me to put in there,
yeah.
Throughout this process of standing up and sharing the truth, I ended up losing my platform. They disabled my account because they did not like the things that I was sharing. So at the moment, I'm building it back up. But my Instagram is Drew Huus, DREWHUUS. And when I met you, Grant, at that point, I had already clearly come to the conclusion that I wanted to stand boldly and share the truth. I wanted to speak from that position, from my position of faith. Not just because, I think my position is right. It's because it actually covers all people. Whether you're a Christian or not, it's an all-inclusive belief. Standing up for your freedoms, that's the beginning of where our rights come from. Like when God created us, he gave us the right to choose. Even in the garden, we had the ability to choose. And that's what led to where we are now. But that fundamental principle that we've been given as Americans is our freedom and our rights to choose. That's something that cannot be violated. Whether you're a Christian or not, I'm standing up for you. And that's what I wanted to do. That's what led me to be a little bit more outspoken and want to fight for people that don't realize what is actually going on.
And I say these guys have prolific social media profiles, certainly in comparison to myself, absolutely. But we're talking tens of thousands of people following. And Jess, I think your TikTok, what are you at, like 600, 750,000, something like that? Tell the people a little about some of your social handles. and same question to you. What brought you to Bibically Conservative in particular?
Yeah. So first of all, my handles are the same on everything. It's Jess on a Mac, which is JESSLANAMAC. And what brought me into Bibically Conservative, so I have paid attention to what's been going on in our world and our society for years, and I've seen it slowly. We've started to lose our foundational morals. And when you don't have solid foundation or morals, you collapse. And so what I think is really important that we do is that we pay attention to building the structure of the family. Because when you don't have proper discipline and direction, children grow up without foundation. And then they raise a generation of children that don't have foundation. And it continues this cycle of people more and more confused and not knowing what is true and what is not. So they're easily manipulated and brainwashed. And they'll basically believe anything that is told to them. So what is so important to me with Bibically Conservative is that we are speaking from the truth. So there's a lot of truths out there, especially in our world today. Everyone has an opinion on something. And so we're coming from a foundation that is solid, that doesn't change from 100 years ago, 100 years from now. It's always going to stay the same. So I think it's so important that we speak that truth. And the role that I think Christians have in politics it's very important because we're called to be bold in our faith. We're called to be salt and light of the earth. And so if we're called to do that, how can we stand back and watch this corruption and evil take place and not shine light on that? And so I love what Bibically Conservative is about, because this isn't right. It's not left. It is the truth. It's God's truth. And so that won't waver at all. And so I'm super, super excited to see what God's going to do through that. And just shine that light on people that can't see the truth.
You said something there a second ago that triggered this next question for me, Jess. It's not left, it's not right. Okay. Now, clearly, one of the reasons why I'm interviewing these two people right now is to hopefully give a message like, hey, join the team, y'all. You know what I mean? Like, Come on, let's get this movement started. I'm in it. We're all in it. If you want to have any part to do with any of this stuff, visit us at bibicallyconservative.com. Come speak to us in particular. I mean, directly go to one of our events. And that first event that we had, I think, was a great example of what you're talking about. It's not left, it's not right. But there's two young people right now that we're looking at currently. Incredible social media followings, incredible voices right now for the community of Middle Tennessee. Andrew, let me go to you for a second, though. All this stuff that we just had in this question leading up of, hey, it's not about left, it's not about right. We're getting involved in politics, but it's also about biblical truth. What do you do then if and when someone comes up to you, either at this event or in your personal life or on your social media pages, and responds back with, you can't do it, Andrew. You got to stop right now. You can't do what you're doing. The Johnson Amendment says that we can't cross these worlds over. Separation of church and state. That's a thing in America, man. Right? What's your response then as to, here's where I stand on it?
That's one of my favorite topics these days, because a lot of people are, when you talk about biblically conservative and encouraging pastors and leaders and people of influence in our communities to stand up boldly in their faith, they go straight to separation of church and state. And it's a common misconception. And I think that's that was part of the plan, was to change what that actually means. Separation of church and state was to keep the state out of the church. It wasn't to keep the church out of the state by any means. If you look at the the beliefs of our founding fathers, the majority of them were pastors. The majority of them were standing for our biblical truth. That's where the morals and values are derived from in our Constitution. And it's very easy for people to have a debate and claim that what they know is facts, and you're never really truly going to know until you do the research yourself, until you find the answers that you're looking for. And once you've gone and done the research and you found those answers that you're looking for, it makes it a lot easier for you to stand and make these claims, which is something that a lot of these people that do, pull up that claim of separation of church and state, they haven't actually done the research and looked into why America is what it is. And so, when people do ask me that question, I kind of get this little smile, because I'm excited to engage with this question, especially. It goes hand in hand with what I was saying before, how being a Christian is all inclusive. I'm standing up for your freedoms, not just Christians, non-Christians, people in the secular world. It doesn't matter where you are, where you stand. I am fighting for your freedom to choose, but I also want to encourage you to learn a little bit about this man named Jesus, who, taught us a lot of how to treat one another. If you were to take, the lessons that he learned through the parables and the stories that he told, the Sermon on the Mount, if you were to take away his name and where it was coming from, and just the ideas and the concepts of how to live your life in society, whether you're on the left or the right, you are going to agree with them, because it's out of love and it's out of being good to the people that are around you. It has nothing to do with being right, which is what being on the left and being on the right is all about these days. It's all about being right. I want to be right. No, you shouldn't try to win the game. This is not a game. These are people's lives that politics is affecting. And, if you were to just look at Jesus's life, he started preaching in a Roman occupied state in the toughest times. So whether you want to say Jesus was involved in politics or not, he was, because those are a lot of the people that he was talking to. He was causing people to turn away from, the old Jewish laws that developed out of the 10 Commandments, when ultimately he said, really, it comes down to two things: love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And if you want to disagree with love your neighbor as yourself, you may not be a Christian. But if you disagree with love your neighbor as yourself, then there's some other things going on in the background that maybe need to be addressed.
Right. I love how you put there exactly the focus on sort of the entirety of the Old Testament commandment being wrapped up into that one command: love your neighbor as yourself. And people have heard me say this before, but the basic equation of America, as far as I'm concerned, is this premise of having a super small government and something else somewhere worrying about taking care of the humanities. Yeah. I mean, the reason why we have a limited government in America, a reason why that was the formula by which we all exist, is because it wasn't up to government to tell you how to take care of your life. The church or the faith communities or something was meant to constrain the fleshly desires of men and teach you how to be a good human being, teach you how to be forming community. I think that's what Andrew was touching on, and that's a little bit why Jess said a second ago, it's not left or right. It's about rebalancing that entire thing. So when we as biblically conservative come and say that we're going to do more education events, we're going to have better speakers, we're going to have, events where we actually teach and train and coach you how to create a grassroots movement, get up to the legislature, track a bill, meet with your legislators, follow that entire process, maybe even want to do some of that from small groups within church, maybe get the church as an institution involved. What we're talking about is solving this problem that both the left and the right are using, of using this strong mallet arm of government to smash you over the head with, right? Andrew just said we're in the game of changing hearts and minds. Ultimately, I'm not going to do that through legislation necessarily. All right, I'm going to frustrate you. And just to finish this out too with that same question, I have one other question before we wrap this up. Let me ask you, do you ever run into that fear that you're going to politicize the religion, turn people off or something?
I do, and I actually have very personal experience with that because of the platform that I have on TikTok. I've shared some videos that are definitely a little bit more political. And it is a fear that I have because I want to stand bold in my beliefs and in the truth. But oftentimes, people see me as this platform that I share my faith, and then they see the political things that I post. And I don't ever want to cause division or steer people away from faith because they don't believe in what I'm saying politically. However, there's a certain way that you can go about it, and in a loving manner. And some people still won't receive it, but as long as you're doing it in a way, I love what Jesus would do is that he constantly spoke in parables. Why? Because the people didn't understand. They wouldn't grasp the idea until he spoke in ways that they could understand. And so I think that's so important for us to do with people is meet them on their level, meet them where they're at and talk to them in ways that they might understand where you're coming from. So they might actually want to listen, because a lot of times I think if you're just speaking something to someone, they're kind of set in their ways. It's a cognitive dissonance is what it is. And they feel like their beliefs are being attacked. And when someone's feeling like they're being attacked, what do? They go on the defense, right? And so they're not really receiving or hearing anything that you're saying. So again, it's really important, I think, to meet them where they are. And really, truly try to listen to them and hear them out and hear their side of things, and then speak to them. And I think that, we have to lose this fear we have of facing giants, if you will, in politics, because that will happen. But God will also provide the tools necessary for us to fight those giants, just like he did for David. And he provides those tools. Ephesians 6 is the armor of God, right? So we are putting on the armor of God every single day. We are prepared to go to battle, and we should be prepared every single day because we're going to have opposition. But when you come prepared, you don't go to battle with a spoon hoping it's going to do what it needs to do. You come prepared with all the tools. And so that's what we have to do going into it. And again, I think the most important thing to take away from that is just to meet people at their level.
Let me pick up from that, Justin. I'll keep this question with you, and then we'll go to Andrew as well. So speaking about meeting people at their level, one of the things I really hope we can do with Bibiclally Conservative is fill in those blanks maybe that other political groups are not giving. It's not just legislative wins. It's not just wins in the political realm. It's wins in the realm of community as well. And Robert Nisbet wrote a book called The Quest for Community, where he wrote something about saying that the rise of the powerful modern state has eroded our sources of community. The family, the neighborhood, the church, the guild. Alienation and loneliness inevitably have resulted. But as the traditional ties of those binds fell away, the human impulse toward community led people to turn ever more towards the government itself, allowing statism, even totalitarianism, to flourish. And what Nisbet means there is that the desire to belong to community, that's never going to go away. Importantly, I think he also means like the desire to be religious, to follow religion. It's not that people are less religious now. They've just replaced what the God is, right? Like that desire to belong is not going to be gone. So if in our 21st century we keep destroying these community institutions, we're only going to be able to turn to government because that's the only one left. So right. It's no wonder why government has become so bloated. But the last question here on our way out, if I could ask you to expound upon that need for community, like why is that so important? Especially you and Andrew coming to a brand new spot like this, not knowing anybody.
You want to start with me or?
Yeah, I'll start with you if you could, yeah.
So the need for community. Look back to even Jesus had his disciples, right? He had his close people that they were in community. They had personal relationships with each other, kept each other accountable, spoke the truth to each other. We weren't meant to do life alone, plain and simple. We were meant for relationship. We were created in the beginning to have a relationship with God and to roam the earth, right? So we were created for that purpose. And so it's this desire in us, this innate desire for a relationship, however that may be. Now, the world has distorted what relationship is. That's why we need to go back to the fundamental of what it looks like, right? From perspective of God and what love truly is. And God is love. And he's that perfect example. So we need relationship. We need people that keep us accountable, and really, we can't know true love if we don't know God, because God is love. And trying to do life on our own, like we've seen, of course, this pandemic, this past year, the isolation, that what it created in people. Depression went up substantially, and people, being stuck alone with themselves. That's not what we were created for. And so we need to understand, that our relationship, it has to be based and founded in God. And then once it's rooted in that, then all of our other relationships will flourish as well. But we have to have that.
Yeah, I think you hit a good point talking about these tangential effects of the COVID shutdown. We have only just begun to see what some of that stuff might look like. Starvation levels off the chart, suicidality off the chart, now divorce levels off the chart. I mean, we're only going to be able to see that in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, not to mention an entire generation of children who knows what that education is going to look like, right? I mean, it again expresses what Jess was just talking about, that need for relationship to mimic the relationship of Christ. Andrew, let me ask you the same thing, man, on the way out. What do you think about this idea of like how much is community needed, and how does that actually maybe play into our relationship with where the government is now, if that's a weird question to ask,
Not so much a weird question. It's a very important question that is so relevant today. At first, when you asked the question to Jess, you mentioned, moving to Tennessee, how important community is. And I guess I took my community for granted to a certain degree back at home. You could also call it the network of people that I knew. Starting to look for work and just develop relationships with people here. The community here in Nashville is amazing. Absolutely. It's almost as if the veil is a little bit thinner here for the Holy Spirit to come in and do his work.
Yeah.
And I've experienced it countless times at, the grocery store, walking out, bumping into somebody, at a coffee shop. Like, there's so many different times where I've felt chills head to toe of the Holy Spirit doing work, just because I reached out to someone and felt a relationship developing with somebody. Community is so extremely important. It's something that, like you were saying, like Jess said about COVID and how we all kind of became isolated because of what government has kind of implemented, with things such as the welfare state and dividing the family unit. People are alone a little bit more these days. And now that we have these screens in between us and actual physical contact with someone else, the loneliness has only grown. And then you took away our actual ability to go out into the world and have social interactions with COVID. And it took it to a whole different level where we're seeing these, the rise in suicide and divorce and everything. When it comes to the community and the relationship, I guess we all don't really understand how much it really means until it gets taken away. That's what taken for granted something is, and you only really see it after the fact. But it's so extremely important because that is definitely something that is innate. It's something that is built into us. Like Jess was talking about, when God created us in the beginning, he wanted a relationship with us, but he wanted us to choose him. And when you have all of these other factors coming into play, like government getting a little bit too big, it makes it easier for people to choose to be alone rather than to work through whatever, differences a couple may have, or people within a community, whatever, is causing a divide. It makes us turn away from it and not work through those hard things so that we can develop an even better relationship, an even better community, and how to treat each other with respect and how to just, interact with society. The second you take away community is the second you start to see very, very terrible things happen. And like you were saying, Grant, this is just the beginning. What is going to happen, the fallout of COVID and not allowing us to be social with each other, especially in the generations to come. There's going to be, far worse things that we are going to see, unfortunately. But at the same time, it has opened our eyes to how important community is.
On the way out here, I'll ask, Jess or Andrew, if there's anything else you want to mention, but we haven't mentioned today. Be thinking about that after this little spiel here. But I just want to make an appeal to anybody watching this, whether it's on the Bibically Conservative thing or one of these two people's, social accounts. If you want to join this little thing that we're doing, Bibically Conservative, go to the website, send us a message, follow us on all our social pages, reach out to me personally. I mean, however you need to do it. While we are probably going to start with some political interest to begin with, I only think we're going that way necessarily just to reset that balance, just to make that equation make sense to people. And primarily, frankly, so people stop fighting each other in the streets. Sincerely, if we can calm down a little bit, see each other as human beings, if I recognize that divine spark in you, then we'll worry about cultural stuff, right? Then we'll start to take over some of the other stuff that probably matters more. Because as Breitbart told us, politics is downstream from culture. So what we're really trying to get at is resetting the stage and an entire worldview lens for everybody, starting in Middle Tennessee and spreading outwards from there. If you want to join, we'd love to have you. But on the way out, Jess, Andrew, anything else that we wanted to touch on that we didn't cover already?
I don't think so.
I'm seeing those. These two are awesome. We'll sign it off for today. I'll include their social links in the bottom description of whatever you're watching on. Sincerely, love each and every one of y'all. We will see y'all very soon.